The meeting.
Okay, we're going to call the Barrio Historic Zone Advisory Board meeting for April 13th on a Monday. Call to order. Philip?
Yes.
Yes. Darren?
Here.
Paolo here. Hope?
Here.
Mitch?
Here.
And Stephen?
Here.
Great. First item up is review and approval of the minutes from September 8th, 2025. Does anybody want to make a motion to approve those?
I will. I motion to approve. Hope.
Do we have
Second.
a second? We're gonna go around for a quick roll call. Philip,
Hi.
yeah, Darren,
Here.
Paolo, yes, Mitch,
Yes.
yes, and Hope
Yes.
and Stephen, yes.
Yes.
Sorry to answer for you. Item number three, Jason. Anybody in the audience?
No, there aren't any, and no emails were received by the deadline date.
Okay, sounds good. So we will move on to the code update, agenda number four. So is it Carver?
Correct, Carver Struve.
Hi,
Hi, and I am here to talk about the code update package that the city of Tucson is working on. Are people able to see my screen?
No,
Uh,
I see your camera.
Okay, it's coming
Or
up now. Now we see
Okay,
it.
okay, perfect, wonderful. Okay, well, thank you all for making some time to meet with us this afternoon on a package that PDSD is working on. This is a general code update package which has some implications for historic neighborhoods within Tucson. So we wanted to take some time to just go over what it is that we are working on developing. So this is kind of an update, kind of a cleanup in terms of some of those little annoying things that we see in the code that we just want to address, or some outdated things, such as paper submittal requirements or things like that. This package was initiated by Mayor and Council on December 16th of 2025, where they requested that we take the action to do these updates. Really, our goals are to modernize the development codes. We want to make them clearer, more consistent, and easier to use. These changes are really intended to make processes more efficient, reduce confusion, and also continuing to support high quality review without some of the issues that we know are in the code. Uh, we had stakeholders were invited to complete a survey. I need to update that on what to include in the code package that was pushed out in January and February. We did receive a good response on that. And we want to note that the feedback
Recording in progress. Recording in progress.
we received on that package. Some of it will be integrated into the code package, but some of the things were kind of beyond the scope of what we're really trying to achieve with this package. So we've kind of taken those, and we will look at those for future code update packages as we move forward. Those are really ones that are, maybe kind of more policy changes that would require a bit more research and outreach on those. But any information that we receive is helpful. And as I get toward the end of these slides, I'll also talk about how to provide any additional feedback that you may have. Given that the survey is closed, we are still taking feedback though, and I'll talk about how to go about doing that. We're looking at targeting mayor and council consideration for this late June, probably actually little bit later than that. I need to update that one as well. It may be July or August when we get to mayor and council for consideration of the code package once we get some outreach done and receive community feedback. As we are updating this code package, we're really looking at City of Tucson policy documents that help inform what goes into this. This includes obviously Plan Tucson, our newly adopted general plan. We want to make sure that any code updates that we do are consistent with that. but also with Tucson Resilient Together, our climate adaptation plan, and the housing affordability strategy for Tucson, or the HAST. So we'll really be looking at making sure that these code updates are consistent and in alignment with these plans, or help to advance their policies. So there are a number of things that brought about this code package, and that we'd like to include in terms of the objectives for completing this package. Number one is that we want to reauthorize and update the city's sign code before it sunsets at the end of August in 2026. The sign code, when it was adopted, did have a sunset date placed at the table at that time. So we want to ensure that we continue to have a sign code by getting that readopted. There are also some minor changes that we are looking to make to the sign code. A lot of them have to do with just improving clarity, definitions, if there are any loopholes that we've seen in the sign code, that we can ensure that we address those. We also have some components in this code cleanup package or code update package that are really looking to comply with state legislation. These are a couple of bills that the state has said that we need to address, mostly relating to adaptive reuse. The state asked us in 2025 to make some changes to adaptive reuse, and then they came back down the line later with a new bill that kind of addressed some of the inconsistencies in the initial bill from the state. So we got in there early, did exactly what the state asked us, and now we need to make some changes to kind of further do what they need us to do. Also, there's some changes proposed relating to construction hours during the hotter times of the year. So we really want to make sure that we address that to help mitigate workers from the impacts of extreme heat. We also are looking at improving usability by just providing clarity through the codes. And again, as I mentioned, addressing inconsistency, errors, and other areas of cleanup, both in the Unified Development Code, but also in the Administrative Manual and Technical Standards Manual. We also have, apologize for that, some areas to address in previous outreach that we conducted for code cleanup projects. We want to be sure that we include things that weren't necessarily in the UDC before, but that would be viable for the code cleanup. And again, as I mentioned, we're really not interested in addressing areas of significant policy change. We just really want to be able to address some of these code cleanups and really, timelines or items where the state is asking us to make changes. However, there are some areas that are relevant. So we can really divide the code update package into 8 subcategories. One is the sign code, which I already mentioned. Also, we're looking at integrating emerging land uses and promoting adaptive reuse, which certainly could have impacts on historic structures as we make them easier to reuse with things such as access or parking or similar requirements. We're also looking to simplify review processes, remove barriers to housing, modernize design standards, clarify parking standards, improving code clarity and usability. And also we are working with the Department of Transportation and Mobility to update sidewalk and landscape maintenance standards. And we're looking forward to getting some information from them on exactly what those components are so that we can help bring those to the public as well. So in terms of adaptive reuse, redevelopment, as you know, of older structures is often restricted and it's difficult to redevelop them, leaving buildings underutilized. We're looking at updating our standards to encourage more innovative use of these structures. This includes updating the non-conforming applicability date to 10 years prior to the date of application. Currently, the code reads that this applicability date is a date in 2015, and so any item before that would have been, or in place before that, or by that date, it's more accurate, would have been available for adaptive reuse, but we're looking at restructuring that to kind of a rolling date of 10 years from the date of application, which is more consistent with what the original intent of establishing that date was. Since this is something that is an ordinance and it's the force of code, it's really difficult to go back and update the date every 5 years or something. So we would just restructure it so that it would continue to kind of self-update in perpetuity.
Carver, can you,
Yeah.
excuse me, can you just clarify what non-conforming applicability means?
So that is if you have a structure that is a non-conforming use and it is something that existed prior to the date of the code, then, or the date of the applicability date, I'm sorry about that. But if it exists prior to that, then you could apply adaptive reuse to it. And so that date was initially in 2015. So anything constructed prior to that could be adaptively reused. But under the proposed change to the code, that 2015 date would now just simply be 10 years prior to date of application. Is that covering it, Dan?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
the only other thing I think related to that is just that non-conforming piece. So whenever we make changes to our zoning code, it potentially makes something non-conforming. A lot of older buildings don't meet the current code, especially related to parking, and it severely limits their use as you move forward. So the goal here really is to open up the ability to reuse a lot of these older buildings that may not meet current codes.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
And sort of in that end as well is this loosening up of requirements to permit substitution of non-conforming uses from a different land use class. Currently, if you have a non-conforming use, you can substitute and continue a use within the same land use class. However, it's so like commercial to commercial or residential to residential. Under the proposed amendments, there would be flexibility to permit substitution across land use classes, provided it is a permitted use within that zoning district. So we're not looking at allowing changes to permit something that's not already allowed in that zoning district. It's simply to allow the flexibility to change the use of the non-conforming use across different land use classes. We're also looking at allowing food service and restaurants for adaptive reuse, allowing alleys to be used for maneuvering for commercial uses of existing structures. Again, a lot of these older areas may need that in order to function properly as an adaptive reuse. Simplifying parking standards for existing structures, and also permitting cultural uses more broadly within different zoning districts within the city. So additionally, we have some proposed updates that are more specific to historic preservation. One of those is to update the code to reflect that the Historic Preservation Office is located within the Department of Planning and Development Services and not Housing and Community Development. As well as to update some of the basic functions of the Historic Preservation Office to be consistent with how they are functioning. There is sort of an artifact in the code. I believe that the Historic Preservation Office at one time was at HCD, so we're simply updating the code to move that to reflect actual conditions. Also looking at making minor changes to the historic review process. This includes removing an outdated cost threshold for minor historic reviews. There was a threshold of a little over $1,000. I don't remember the exact amount off the top of my head that would trigger that. And so they're proposing to remove that. And then also to allow virtual and electronic reviews for minor historic reviews, which is again consistent with current practice and keeping the option open though for site visits. So there's the discretionary option to make a site visit, but for a lot of the sort of, I guess, run-of-the-mill times where electronic reviews or virtual reviews are being done, this simply codifies that practice. Additionally, we are proposing to add a notification requirement for demolition, where a physical sign is to be posted 15 days prior to demolition of any buildings in Tucson, that's consistent with existing PDSD posting requirements for entitlements procedures. So essentially, we're taking a posting procedure that's already in the code that's used for other processes and tying it to a requirement that sites be posted 15 days prior to any demolition. We're also proposing additional language clarifying the process to update historic preservation zone design guidelines, as there's no process currently outlined. There's process for adopting the design guidelines, but there's no update process. So we just want to tie that to some of the existing processes that we have in the code for other types of updates, very consistent with that, just to ensure that it's clear what would need to be done to update those. So we are looking at all of these code changes all in these 8 subcategories, pulling them together into one, what's essentially an omnibus code package. There are dozens of little different changes, pieces of code that will be changed as proposed through this process. We are in the process of bringing those together, looking at getting them posted by late this month online. We're developing a website that's going to have all the information on the proposed, what we call red line changes or draft ordinance language. And from there, we're going to be setting up 2 public meetings. These will take place in mid-May. Probably the 16th and the 20th is what we're looking at right now, but don't hold me to that just yet. We're still kind of verifying space that's available and available of people to be at those meetings. But that's about when we're looking at holding 2 community feedback meetings. One of those would be in person and one virtually as well, just to make sure that people have the opportunity to attend. So stay tuned for more information on that. If you'd like to attend and provide feedback at those meetings, or simply review the materials online, we'll have an opportunity to provide feedback that way as well. And so based on that, this is our tentative timeline for the code update process. We have mayor and council initiation that occurred in December. We're looking at our community engagement and input in May, finalizing drafting the code amendment language really by the end of May, maybe first part of June, the very latest, but then going to Planning Commission in mid-June for the Planning Commission study session. The study session, the Planning Commission will have the opportunity to review these changes and ask questions of staff and make recommendations. From there, in July, we'd like to go to Planning Commission public hearing to receive feedback, and then mayor and council consideration in August. So it's really, just sort of going through all those different steps in the process like we would for any other code update package. It's simply that we just have a whole lot of little updates proposed for this. So in the meantime, if you would like to provide additional feedback on anything that was covered here, or as information comes out, we certainly welcome that. I will caveat it to say that if you have larger items that are more policy changes that you would really like to see, please let us know, but we probably won't be able to get that included in this particular code package. It's more than likely that a larger historic code package would come down the line, and that's something where there could be a lot more kind of targeted outreach, very specific to those changes and more consideration of those policy changes. But again, it's very helpful for us to have that, because that helps us to kind of gather those items for those future code packages. And that information can be provided by email. I'd recommend that you send it both to Desiree and myself. That way we are both able to capture that information. We're looking at it kind of for different reasons, but we can bring that together and make sure that it gets collated and captured for either inclusion now or for future code packages. I also want to note that the advisory board certainly can provide feedback on the code changes as a board as well. But if you're doing that, it's important to remember that all deliberations must occur during a duly noticed open meeting, per the Arizona open meeting law. So, we're certainly happy to accept feedback from individuals, but if the board is putting their name on that, that is something that would need to be deliberated within an open meeting. And so with that, I thank you for your time and open up the floor to questions.
Thanks, Carver.
Thank you.
These updates to the processes of updating design guidelines, does that affect our current guidelines that are under review with the city of Tucson?
It would not affect those at all. It would simply establish a process for future updates to design guidelines, regardless of who is making those updates within the city, just outlining how that would need to occur. So it wouldn't actually have any effect on something that's currently in process and being developed.
And give me an idea of what are you updating, or what's the major driver on that?
I think the driver on that is that, and Desiree's worked more closely with this, but that people just determine that if design guidelines need to be updated, there's no procedure within the code to do it. So you could kind of, squint and say, well, we'll use another procedure for a different type of guidelines. But the challenge of that is that if it were ever, challenged in court, I don't know how legally defensible that would be. So this is simply a cleanup to make sure that if design guidelines get updated, they're following a process that is duly codified within the Unified Development Code to make sure that they're updated correctly.
And are you aware if there are any timelines in that process? Will there any timelines be included?
I would have to look at that. I think that it would be kind of similar to any other code changes, which is generally around 9 months. But that, is dependent. Yeah, Dan?
Yeah, I can jump in on this a little bit because I probably know a little more about the reasoning and everything. So basically, in the Unified Development Code, it has a procedure for adopting the initial set of design guidelines, but it doesn't have anything in there related to updates, amendments, et cetera. And so it really is clarifying that process for making those changes. And I think the process generally is a technical standards manual change and not a zoning condition change, not a Unified Development Code change. So it is a shorter timeline for approval. I know that we are at some point looking at kind of getting some assistance from a consultant to get some additional feedback on those design guidelines to try to move that forward. So I know it is on our list. I'm not entirely sure what the full timeline will be, but it is something that we do have a plan for moving forward. And I'm sure Desiree can probably talk a little more about that at the next meeting.
Carver, on the 15-day posting for a demolition, that seems like a really good thing to have. But I'm just wondering what motivated that inclusion? Like what's the goal there?
So Dan may be able to speak to a little bit more the history on that and what sort of brought that one about.
Yeah, so actually this is kind of related to, so I live in Jefferson Park. There was a home at 1177, I think, East Leicester that was it was demolished about maybe 2 months ago or so. And the process and how things are set up for notification, there's just no real good recourse for lack of notification on that. And so we wanted to make it really clear when that was happening. Previously, it was like mailing it out to property owners, but a lot of times they're absent or whatever, and it's not necessarily seen by neighbors. And so the goal there really is to make sure that everyone is aware and that it's more transparent. And so that was really the impetus for it. And then we started looking at the process and realized this may be the best way to make sure that everyone in the area is aware that that is occurring. I do want to note that It doesn't, obviously, it doesn't change anything within HPZs and the historic preservation zone. So Barrio Historico, there's the whole 5, 8, 10 regulations related to demolition that are still in place. This is just additional for those outside of historic preservation zones.
Okay, and just to clarify, that that demolition that would be posted would already be permitted for demolition.
That's correct. They still have to go through the process. They have to document everything, but it's for those that are allowed. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you all for your time. Again, if you have anything that comes up, feel free to email Desiree and myself, and we appreciate your feedback and your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carver. Dan, thank you for the update.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. So the next item is staff updates. I just have one thing. I noticed there's someone in attendance. Okay, there was an iPhone 2 and I was trying to capture who they were. But regarding any staff updates, there is none right now in the permit process flow. However, there could possibly be an upcoming action agenda item for your May 11th meeting. This I know is a shade structure. I spoke to the person last week and I told them what is needed, but all depends on how quickly they get submitted in. They go through the required submit to create a subrecord and it's a deemed complete design package. So again, there's a possibility that you might have a action item on your next meeting. Other than that, there's been no minor reviews to report on.
Jason, is that a shade, what do you call it, a shade sale or a sale shade?
Shade structure, yes. And I spoke to the individual and he told me that you told them to call me and that's the person I spoke with last week.
Yeah, okay. I'm just curious if we should probably, as a board, update ourselves, inform ourselves as to whether that is in our guidelines. Because that's, yeah, just so we're ready for that.
Hmm. Should we look at them? The existing ones, you mean?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if we have time and you guys are okay with it, yeah. And my goal there is that those are pretty modern looking. And so that's just my issue.
I'm in the
Okay.
document now doing a word search for shade.
Okay, I just like to remind the board members, this is not an actual agenda item to be discussed at this time.
We're not discussing the particular submittal. We're just trying to look into the potential discussion of a sail shade structure. I mean, is that okay?
Um, Dan, do you have any thoughts on this? If it can be done in this public meeting or not?
Yeah, it probably should be an agenda item to kind of discuss it. We can always put an agenda item on the next one to kind of talk through even just generals like, kind of shade structures. And I will say, I mean, obviously you have the ability to kind of look through them and research them for the next meeting. So that might be a good way to do this as well. I worry about it venturing into discussing that project, and it's a little that's my biggest
I have no
concern there.
idea what that project looks like. I'm just
Yeah,
talking
okay.
about shade structure,
Yeah.
shade sail structures in general.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So,
And I don't think we had anything in there with that.
I don't see anything in the original document, through a word search for shade.
Okay.
yeah, and if the board members wish and they want to have this on the agenda, uh, Paolo, please notify me so I can certainly add it to the agenda for next time.
Yeah. Are we allowed to reference the guidelines we've been working on for projects, or can we not do that until those are approved? Jason or Dan, do you know?
As far as I know, and Dan can correct me if I'm wrong, until they have been adopted by mayor and council or city manager, I believe, city manager, they are not in effect.
Right.
That's
So we
correct.
would have to reference the original guidelines, the ones that were in place.
Yeah, that's correct.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay. For 20 years ago. Okay.
Um, Jason, so if we want to put this on the next agenda,
Mhm.
we're not allowed to talk to each other. So how do we how do we decide that we want to ask you to put something on the next agenda?
Well, it would be, the conversations they usually have with the chair for all the HPZs. There's an agenda item you want. The chair notifies me and I'll put it on the agenda for you.
Okay.
Well, why don't we just do this? We can just add it to the agenda for next time.
Yeah. I was
And
just
then
emailing Jason.
yeah, okay. Yeah, because we can just put it on the agenda, then we don't have to deal with
Okay.
kind of trying to
Mhm.
figure it out.
I mean,
Yeah.
boy, this open meetings thing is really cumbersome. I mean, it's
Yeah,
just
it
I
can be.
understand the intent, but boy, it is just over the top restrictive. I mean, case in point here, like
I mean, can we have a regular agenda item that is review, um, I don't know, review our guidelines or like a what is it? Like I walk down the street and I see 10 things that I wonder about. Like, and I don't know who to talk to them about, like buildings that are falling down. Like, I don't even know what to do with that. And I could come up with it on my own, but I also feel like as a group, it's so much better to collaborate and be able to ask.
Well, I
Um,
don't think we're allowed to do that as a group unless that property owner is in attendance to talk about specific buildings that are falling down or whatnot. I think
so I guess, right. So not talk about that project, but say, wonder what to do. Like, should I turn in a code violation? Like, is
that's
that some, just
that's what
generally,
I would do. I've
yeah.
filed some code violations. I think the problem with that is you never know where that code violation stands because I've made a couple of complaints. And how do you follow up on that, Jason and Dan? Do I look up the case number or I don't
Yeah, so a lot of times that'll end up online and like in our property research online, you should be able to see it in there. I will say this, yes, if you do have a question about that stuff, reach out to our historic preservation office and we can kind of help you with that type of thing. So if you see something that looks kind of strange, like someone's doing maybe unpermitted work,
Mhm.
or there's a building that's falling down or something of that sort, and you have a question about it, just reach out to us and we're happy to help with that.
And then
But can
I
we
will,
ask for go ahead, sorry.
I'll just elaborate on what I've seen with recent code violations is even though there's a code violation, inspectors go out, they document it, and they get them in the process. It won't come onto an agenda until that person actually submits
Hmm.
for an application, permit application, and creates a sub-record. So, for instance, I'm thinking of one that got reported of February last year, but they didn't submit anything till February of September last year. So
Hmm.
a code violation could be in the system for months before the person actually starts to begin the historic review process. But that's kind of detrimental to the property owner since, they're accruing month after month, and I believe fines start to build up. So it's better in their favor to just get this done as quickly as possible.
Does the city actually levy those fines?
As far as I've heard, yes. Maybe
Yeah.
Dan can speak more to that.
Yeah, we do. And I mean, eventually, our goal is to bring them into conformance with the code and get them out of violation. So we do tend to work with them. A lot of times it takes a while, and they don't necessarily always have the money to be able to hire an architect if they need that and things of that sort. But we do try to work with them. If it becomes an issue that, it does go to court and there's fines that get levied and all kinds of different things. But yeah, so as Jason said, it takes a while sometimes on those, but as long as they're making a good faith effort to move forward and try to correct those issues, we will work with them.
Mhm.
Can we ask for, can we put on the agenda some updates of recent code violations that we've addressed?
I believe you can. There's specific ones in mind,
Well,
or
I'm wondering about the one on Simpson and Convent. I don't know the address. The address is let's see. So anyway, southeast corner of Simpson and Convent. There's a
okay,
I did,
okay.
we heard about the roof, but we didn't hear about some, as far as I know, we didn't hear about some other issues.
Okay, so is this going to be, say, an item that you want on every meeting? Uh, updates on code violations and Barrio Historico, is that it?
I'd love that.
That might be great. And, you know, usually there won't be any, but that would be great as a standing agenda item.
Okay.
So would we need to specify to you ahead of time particulars or?
I think don't need the particulars. We could always just kind of look back and see what was there and then just prepare. But I have made a note of this that you want to put this as a standing agenda item. And then I believe Paolo was going to email me something else, so I'll make sure
Yeah.
if there is something, if there's an action to be taken on the next meeting, I'll be sure the agenda is updated to reflect this.
Okay. Jason, can I ask you a question about a follow-up on our workshop? It was a question I had about whether or not the county plans review, whatever, I can't remember what they're called. After a project goes through us and is approved with conditions, does the plans review committee see revised drawings? I asked the question, I can't remember the answer.
Okay, I
uh,
can go ahead and answer that. So, plans review subcommittee doesn't want to see revised drawings. That creates problems with the PRS. What PRS wants to see is what the board members saw, and then it's the same set of original design package. That way, plans review committee is not making recommendations based on a revision. And that recently came up maybe at not last week's, but the one before in a different HPZ, where they noted that they're looking at a revised design package. And they did not like that. But that was just one time I've seen it happen since I've been here. Did that answer your question, Stephen?
It does. My concern is broad, though, in that when we approve, so there was a 514 West 17th, we approved uh, a, a, some proportion changes to the structure. We improved some fenestration proportions as well. These are things that need to be seen, drawn to scale. I mean, we just said, oh, this needs to be X number of feet smaller, you know, blah, blah, blah. Those are things that can fundamentally change the appearance of something, of a building. And I just am concerned that that is kind of irresponsible in the, I mean, that the process itself is irresponsible because we don't know what it's going to look like. You know, we don't, and the plans review committee doesn't.
Right. Keep in mind that because all HPZs review applications before PRS, that both entities need to review the same original drawing set and design package. Whatever HPZs recommend for revisions should not go before the PRS. It should be the original. I was told this by the chair of PRS that uh, maybe the PRS members actually liked what was on the original design package rather than the revision. That was a comment that the chair had made because of that one issue that came up several meetings ago. So, but keep in mind, we are now doing an executive summary. So the executive summary is capturing when this HPZ reviewed on this date, they made the recommendation for XYZ with these conditions. And we've been reading those conditions, that recommendation for approval or denial based on these conditions. So the PRS are aware of what HPZ is recommending.
Right, but the fact remains that a building will get built without, unless I'm missing something,
Mhm.
without any of us ever seeing the proportions of that building. Do I have that wrong?
So ultimately, what happens is, I think it would be it would go to the the advisory board, the local board. They would make a recommendation to move it forward. Same thing goes to PRS. They would make a recommendation. Both of those recommendations would be reviewed by our historic preservation office and our historic preservation officer, who have the kind of technical knowledge to be able to take that and move it forward. And then they basically make conditions that ensure that as it's being reviewed, it's going to meet those conditions. So they would go through and do that. We also require them to submit a revised design package after that for those in a lot of cases. And so what that ends up doing is that revised design package comes back that shows all of that information. So then when you're reviewing those documents, either the development package or you're reviewing the building permits, you have those revised documents to review it against. And so that's kind of how the process works in order to ensure that it is meeting the recommendations and the decision letter ultimately from our director.
Mhm. So the city preservation office does see final drawings. Okay. And so they're gonna decide, like, one of the things Desiree kind of hammered home is, like, does this feel right? I mean, so you guys in the preservation office are going to make that decision. And you're
There, yeah.
and if it doesn't feel right, are you going to say this doesn't feel right and make it?
If I could, but it wouldn't be, it's not that it feels right. We are evaluating against the criteria based on what's in the code ordinance, the TSM, design guidelines, and the Secretary of Interior standards. So we're really basing on recommendations and then seeing how it really fits in with all of that.
Absolutely. All of
So
that.
that's, and
But
then so some recommendations can be taken from the HPZ, from the PRS. It's not whole cloth sometimes it is, but it's based on if it really meets all those criteria that I just mentioned. Then we tell the person, revise your drawings before you get a signed decision letter.
okay. Yeah, it doesn't, yeah, okay, I get it. It's a little scary, actually, because
Yeah, there,
a
yeah.
building can, like, if you reduce the height of a building, all of a sudden there's more of a horizontality, whereas just proportion is anyway. You guys get my point, but I'll stop. But it just seems like there should be more review. If
Well,
there's an approval based on some conditions that important. So, okay.
Stephen, I'm going to say this from my own perspective, having been in other places.
Mhm.
I've worked with code ordinances in other cities that I would say has stronger language, which I feel Tucson could improve upon. And that might help with kind of the concerns you're bringing up. Uh, and that's something that I would say, as maybe private citizens, you could bring up. We have code updates. You could maybe try to encourage further code updates to particular sections of the code ordinance or TSM.
Mhm.
Because I certainly see that there could be stronger language, especially in areas that could happen for something that's maybe non-historic or a new construction under a certain square footage.
Mhm.
Um, Otherwise, the process can become onerous, and I
Mhm.
see that. And I
Yeah.
can see where you're coming from because then you're wondering, why is this happening?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
those are my 2 cents.
Yeah, and I will mention just real quickly is that there is intention to make changes to kind of larger portions of the historic code outside of our code update. And there have been recommendations from a working group that's part of the historic commission as well. So I think there will be an opportunity for some of those changes as we move forward for that as well.
Okay.
Dan,
Thank you for indulging me.
yeah, well, Dan, you mentioned that the Tucson Pima County Historic Mission, not mission, commission has been talking about this. Perhaps the board members, if they see it on the agenda, they could attend and provide some additional information as, say, a private citizen.
Yeah, no, that's entirely it. All those meetings are public
Mhm.
and get noticed, and that would be a great
Yeah.
place for that.
And I believe it's the second Wednesday of every month at 12 o'clock.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, definitely attend and provide that input. They need to hear more of this.
Okay. So as a private citizen, can I uh, call you, Jason or Dan, and get the details on what those meetings are and when? You gave me the when, but anyway.
I can certainly provide links. I know it's out of the city clerk's website. It's not on the regular website that we use for the HPZs. It's on a different web server, I believe.
Okay.
But I have your email. I could certainly try to give you that link and certainly the right direction. What I'll do is I'll send that out to all board members.
That would be great. Great. Thank you so much.
Just Stephen, your main concern is projects that get approved with conditions that you never see or we never see the final result of that on paper. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's exactly it. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I don't like to add time to people's projects, but, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one of the ways to maybe eliminate that is to have a continuance on a project. So that means they would come back with the design changes to the Barrio board before it goes on to PRS. And
I think we had continued that. Is there a limit on how many times we can continue?
I believe it's only once.
And I think that's why as I recall, you guys may remember it differently, but I think that's why we had to pretty much take action.
so there's a one-time limit, Jason.
I believe by the second meeting, you need to make a recommendation that's not continuance. So it's either approval conditions or flat out denial.
Okay.
So if we
Do keep in
denied,
mind, right? Mhm.
if we denied, if they wanted to continue, they would have to come back with a new
No,
plan.
once you make a denial, that recommendation moves forward to PRS and they're told that
Hmm.
the HPZ made the recommendation for denial.
Yeah.
And then the recommendations are given to the planning director, as Dan mentioned, and then it's evaluated against the criteria I mentioned earlier.
If we do a denial, are we allowed to include notes? Do those get forwarded? Like, here's why, specific violations that we see or conflicts with the code?
I think that can be in the motion. I saw that in another HPZ where they said something to the effect of, even though this fence was already built and it's not appropriate to the historic district, we are going to recommend approval, but this is not setting a precedent.
Mm.
That was all in the motion. So
It
in
just
a
seems
way,
like
you are putting your thought processes in the
Mhm.
motion.
I like the idea of the next step having our context, not just what could be interpreted as a grumpy no. You know, if they knew why, it might hold
Well,
up a little better. I'm thinking about the roof. Like if we had had the wherewithal to cite what we were talking about more specifically, maybe they would have heeded it, or at least,
Mhm. Yeah,
yeah.
good point.
and you can certainly do that with a recommendation of denial, stating that this roof is incompatible and inappropriate for the following reasons in the motion. Yeah, I
Mhm.
see that because I've seen it in other HPZ meetings.
Mm-hmm. It's never easy, is it?
No.
Okay.
Questions? Must be a no. So I'm going to make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second that.
Thank you, Stephen. Philip,
Yes.
Darren,
Yes.
Paolo, yes. Hope,
Yes.
Mitch,
Yes.
and Stephen.
Yes.
Yep. Everybody, thank you very much.
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Bye.
Thanks.
Have a good
Bye.
evening.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
all.
Bye.
You guys. Thank you very much.
Uh-huh. Sure.